talk about some other parts for the JZ. What other parts have I gone through trial and error, or like this oil system, how have I progressed to finding the best possible route for it? Another thing would be alternators. So I always had needed a high output alternator because on the race car you have two high flow fans, and you have bigger fuel pumps, and you have multiples. In my case I have 3 fuel pumps. You guys might have 2, 3, some people have 4. That's crazy if you have 4, but say you have a large fuel pump that draws a lot, and you have an electric water pump, you have giant fans for your radiator, you have a fan for your oil cooler. There's many things that the race car might have. You have electric power steering. So then you need minimum 150 amp alternator and up. The hard thing is if you don't have a PDM, you're not going to be able to monitor exactly how much everything's drawing. It's a guesstimate off of what the manufacturer says that it does draw when in use, and that all depends on the temperature and the length of the wiring going to it, and there's like a big equation. So you wouldn't know unless you had a PDM monitoring it and you could look back on your data logs. So you kind of have to go on the high side with the alternator. I was using a 240 amp self-exciting alternator from an unknown brand I probably shouldn't say because I don't need to be that guy that's, you know, throwing another brand under the bus. Well, long story short is they market it as a 240 amp. It's not really a 240 amp, but I didn't, you know, distrust it at the beginning. I just thought, oh, my car's drawing a lot of amps, and I just thought, okay, maybe the fans and the pumps I have and the power steering kit I have, which was a MR2 power steering pump with the electric power steering, is drawing more than they say, so it's killing these 240 amp. In reality, that is more like a 150 or 140 amp alternator, and it fails so quick, just always failing. It's just not a good unit. I had 3 of them, and I kept sending them back and rotating between 3, and it was like 2015 season went through like 6. And 2015 was my first year in Pro 2, just learning, figuring out all these errors. 2016 season, I had my car was, you know, a lot of bugs worked out of it. It was working better. Alternator, not working better. Went through like 9 that season. And it cost me, like, making it to top 4, or maybe you never know what the future would have held. It cost me like getting knocked out in top 8 twice that season because the alternator just died and the car doesn't run the same. It's like the worst thing to have that happen. So then I kept thinking, it's my wiring, it's this. So I finally, and my battery even, all these things. So I finally sent these alternators to this company that builds race alternators, and I was like, hey, can you guys you know, like, test this? And they tested, and they're like, yeah, it works, but and I sent all 3. They all came back with different numbers. One was a 135, one was a 155, one was a 145, because like each alternator is going to create slight differences, maybe within 5 amps, but not that many amps, and they're also it's supposed to be a 240. Anyways, that's where the RAD 160 was born. So then I had I took 3 of those, and I had built all 3 of them into a custom self-exciting alternator. We changed the housing, we like changed a lot of things, but we used a GM based product, and then we just don't use the plug and we do self-exciting. So once the motor starts spinning, it starts sending power out of here. We slowed it down by putting a bigger pulley on it so we won't over rev it. We tested it up to 370 degrees Fahrenheit, and at 300 plus degrees, well, if you overheat it, the epoxy on the back will change colors. We have like, that's like our little test. But if you don't, you shouldn't overheat it, because well, if you try and ask, you know, 200 and something amps, it won't work. So we advertise it at 160. It's actually higher than that. It's more like a 180. Even at 280 degrees Fahrenheit, 300 degrees Fahrenheit, it's still like a 180 amp alternator. but I'm gonna advertise it at 160 in case you guys are like, well, 350 degrees Fahrenheit. It'll still be 160 amp alternator, and it'll work for 3 years now. My same first one that I put on my Pro car in 2017 is still on there.
RAD RAD Industries next entire Toyota.
So all 2017 season, all 2018 season, and any practices, and now part of 2019 season, still going strong. Then I've been selling them to many other people, like Ola uses it on his Supra, couple Pro 2 guys. There's a bunch of alternators out there. Never had one fail yet. I'm sure someone will kill one. We haven't had one fail yet. It's a great solution for when you're racing and you need 160 or a little less. Self-exciting, so it's less wiring involved. That's one other thing that we've made the step and designed our own part for. So check that out on our website. And then just real quick, if I haven't shown you guys on YouTube, I want to show you some of the billet pieces we're working with. I'm going to go over to Rory's car and show you some of the things we've done. Alright, let's go. Before we go look at Rory's car, here is an anodized black billet KRC power steering pump bracket. We also sell them in silver, the machine finish. So these two things, this helps you run KRC power steering in place of where the AC would have been on a stock JZ, and off the ATI damper. If you have dry sump, this won't work out, but majority of people do not have dry sump because it's really expensive. Then this is a part, after many years of staring at the motor, finally got myself to do this, because I used to run different water inlet that you cut a big hole where your water goes in between the timing belt. This is for guys running an electric water pump when they have a rear radiator, which there's a plenty of guys out there doing that on their race car, and they have to fab up their own way to get the water in, but then they're kind of exposing the timing belt, which lets rubber get in there, or rocks, or whatever the case. So this was my solution without having it look ugly, look good, and hold the alternator on this little tensioning spot here. And then on top of that, we were able to use this. We work with Sleeper Design to do all our billet parts, and then they're sold primarily through us. You can't get them anywhere else. And here we have the upper water neck that matches the same distance out. We'll put a picture of my race car in here and you guys can see. So that when the motor's sitting like that and you got the alternator water coming in, this is on the head, and then they're parallel with each other this way. So then you can put the ORB fitting in here. If you're a guy that wants -16, you thread in a 16 union to 16. Or if you're a guy that wants a 20, because you want bigger hoses, you can go -20 to 16. If you're going to say, oh, it reduces the size, it doesn't really reduce the size. That's the way a 16 is made. It's the same size as a 20 on the inside of this part of the union. The inside of the actual hose is a different size, but you take down all the turns that it makes, and going in here, going through the motor, 16 is plenty efficient. The only benefit of a 20 is that it holds more water in your system, so in theory that would help cooling a little better because you have higher volume of water. Let me grab a billet one, because this black one's really cool, but when you're looking through the eyes of the camera, for you guys watching, I think that you might want to see what it looks like in billet. Boom, there it is. So it's 2-piece design, same as a stock water pump, and we've bored it out even more, so there's a little bit more volume of water that can go through the passageway as it enters the motor. Uses an O-ring on the inside of here and uses an O-ring right here. I chose -16 because I had kind of been researching over the years of other race cars that run a 16 in and 16 out, and it seemed to work. And I had always done a 20 in and a 16 out, but then it's weight reduction and it works. It's like works the same but less weight. I'm super proud of this part. It's something that like I still can't believe it's a reality when I look at it. I'm like, whoa. And the stock plastics literally just fit just right on it and still screw in. Let me show you upper water neck in billet as well so you get the picture. Well, they're all billet but in machine finish. There you go. So this upper water neck bolts to the head with supplied hardware. If you're running a stock water pump, it can recirculate back into the stock water pump through the water pipe and go back into where your thermostat is, just like a stock upper water neck would. It has a spot for the stock temp sensors. There's 2 on a stock JZ, both right here. If you're running in a race car application, not stock, and you have a bunch of aftermarket stuff, you could buy this plug. We have them in billet and black, so this one is intended to go with this one. It goes in here. The Allens hold it in place, pre-threaded. Does not leak. It's on my comp car and my practice car. Works fine. I run my temp sensor in there on the comp car, and then I run a return back because I run a different style temp sensor on the practice car. I return back into the system from turbo feed inlet here on the practice car. So I'm going to go through and show you some different applications on the cars. So now you've seen the visual of how they look just on the bench here. Let's go check out the cars and see what it looks like. We're going to start with Rory's car so I can show you power steering, water inlet, water outlet. Here is what it looks like with the power steering bracket installed with the pump and everything on the car. This is the water inlet with the alternator installed. Rory's using a -20 feed, -16 return, and then he does not use anything on the underside over here. It's just water out and his sensors on here because he doesn't have thermostat, doesn't use a stock water pump. He didn't have to cut in here because the water enters right here. He didn't have to cut any of the plastics. All the stock plastics are bolted on. Everything's good to go. Safe timing belt, and it all fits just how it should. This is what it would look like if you had to cut everything apart. Let's go look at one other car, and then we'll look at the stock motor where it returns back into the stock system. So this one does not have it yet. So that's the power steering setup, same as Rory's, but I feed the water out of the turbo. First the water leaves the back of the head, goes into the turbo, then it comes down here and does a tight 90 and goes in the bottom there. And I also feed my heat exchanger right here, goes into the other spot on the bottom of the temp sensor. There's many ways of doing this, and last but not least, if you're running a stock JZ water pump and you just want it to look really nice, run an AN fitting, but have it recirc back into your stock water pump, this is the way to go. So when you have a stock water pump, you're obviously not going to use the water inlet, but you can still use the RAD 160 if you like, and the upper water neck. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed all that. That's some parts from RAD Industries.